Greetings, cocktail aficionados. It's John Moser with another edition of Cocktails Out of Quarantine. It's been a few weeks since I've released an edition. Been kind of crazy at work, but I'm really excited for what I'm going to make for you today. Actually, today and tomorrow, because it's a two-day process. You see, I am not going to make a cocktail today. Instead, I'm going to make something that is commonly used in many cocktails, most notably the Manhattan, one of my favorite drinks, and that's sweet vermouth. I've talked about sweet vermouth many times here. The quality matters, and if you're using a cheap vermouth, it's going to affect the taste. Unfortunately, locally, I can't usually find the good stuff. Carpano Antica, that's the good stuff, but I've got to go out of town to get it, and when I do get it, it's like $30 a bottle. So I started looking at recipes, and it took me a while to find the one that I think is just right. It's going to have the proper botanicals, the herbs and spices. Let me step back though and tell you a little bit about where sweet vermouth comes from. You've heard of the difference between sweet vermouth and dry vermouth. Dry comes from France, sweet comes from Italy, but they are both aromatized, fortified wines. And sweet vermouth comes out of Italy, as I said, developed first in the middle of the 18th century. Like many liqueurs, it was first created for medicinal purposes. You would have found it at the apothecary. People would have taken it for stomach ailments and other things, I don't know what. In the 19th century, it became common to drink it over ice, maybe with some club soda. By the end of the decade, it was being commonly used as an ingredient in cocktails. And of course, that's why I'm making it this time. It's got a lot of ingredients. This is it's not a difficult thing to make. It just has lots of stuff. And it's often the stuff that you're not gonna find at your local grocery store, but you can go online to herb distributors and spice distributors and get these things. I'm not going to list every single ingredient, although I'm gonna walk you through the process. I'm going to have in the description for this video a whole list of the various dry ingredients we'll be using. The liquid ingredients, we're going to use a Pinot Grigio as a base. It's nice, neutrally flavored. It's not going to be terribly strong. It's going to take on the flavors that we mix with it. And it doesn't have to be expensive. This is a $7.99 bottle, because after all, real vermouth makers don't use their best, use great wines in order to make vermouth. So that's going to be perfectly good. And then at the end of the process, in other words, tomorrow, we'll be adding some things to fortify it. We're going to add a little bit of tawny port, which is going to give it some of the reddish color that we associate with sweet vermouth, as well as obviously some sweetness, and some cognac. Add some rich sweetness. We'll also be adding sugar at that stage too. So that's the fortifying process, as I said. First though, we're going to go through the process of turning this wine into the basis for vermouth. All right, let's get started. We start with the wine. We are ultimately going to use 3 to 3.5 cups of this. That is better part of a bottle, but we're only going to start with 2. Bottles of inexpensive Pinot Grigio. Pour it right in here. I'm going to set this aside right now. Ultimately, we're going to be adding the dry ingredients, and then we are going to and then we're going to bring that to a boil. But so that you can see all the stuff that's going into here, I'm going to set this aside and combine the dry ingredients in here. Now, here we go with all these dry ingredients. We've got 2 tablespoons of raisins, followed by a teaspoon of dried bitter orange peel. This is something you're going to want to get from a company that specializes in herbs and spices, especially some of the more exotic ones. We are going to follow that up with about a 2.5-inch cinnamon stick, followed by an ounce, or say 1.5 teaspoons of wormwood, something else you're gonna have to get from a specialty place. Wormwood, by the way, is the active ingredient in absinthe, but don't worry, it's not gonna give you hallucinations. It's fine. Pour that in there. A 1/2 teaspoon of gentian root. This is a bitter herb that's native to the Alps. And then a half teaspoon of ground anise seeds. Ooh, that smells good. A half teaspoon of angelica root, something else that's pretty specialized. And then a half teaspoon of something that is more common, probably have that in your spice cabinet at home, ground ginger. We follow that up with a half teaspoon of chamomile tea flowers and a half teaspoon of ground nutmeg. A quarter teaspoon of coriander seeds, a quarter teaspoon of sassafras bark. It's almost root beer-like flavor. A quarter teaspoon of centauri, another bitter herb. A quarter teaspoon of dried oregano. A quarter teaspoon of dried sage leaves. A quarter teaspoon of dried basil. A quarter teaspoon of dried thyme. Now we're at some really small amounts. 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground fennel seeds. 1/8 of a teaspoon of cardamom pods, which is like 2. Actually, crush these a little bit. There we go. Release the seeds from their pods. There we go. And 1/8 of a teaspoon of orris root, another more or less obscure herb. 1/8 of a teaspoon of dried rosemary. 1½ bay leaves. We have 1/8 of a teaspoon of freshly ground pepper. 5 allspice berries that we are going to crush slightly. Just pop it like that. Oop. That all in there. 5 whole cloves. 4 juniper berries. Again, we want to crush those just a little. Release some of the flavors in there. And finally, a single star anise. Here we go with our mixture of herbs and spices and botanicals. Now let's boil our wine. So we have our 2 cups of Pinot Grigio on medium heat. And we will add this blend. And we're going to gradually bring this to a boil over medium heat. And once we get it up to that point, we're going to let it boil, simmer on low to medium heat for approximately 10 minutes. And we're essentially making wine tea here, but there's no reason for you to watch while this boils, because that's boring. So I'll see you when we're about to go on to the next step. All right, our mixture of wine and this potpourri of botanicals has been simmering now for just under 10 minutes. Just a few more seconds, it'll be ready. What we have here, it's just a nice little simmer. We don't want to bring it to a full boil. I've been watching it. I've been adjusting the heat in order to get it right. And once it's ready, right, 4 more seconds, I'm just going to take it off the heat, let it cool a little bit. We don't have to let it cool all the way down. There's our timer. And then we're going to put in a bottle. We're going to store that for the next 24 hours, and then we'll be ready to finish tomorrow. Our last step for tonight is going to be to transfer this mixture to this bottle, and we're going to let that stew together. Cinnamon stick. This does not look appetizing, I understand. But don't worry, tomorrow all this stuff is going to get strained out after it's had an opportunity to sit in here for a night. I know, it just looks like sludge now, but by tomorrow night, it's going to look like beautiful vermouth. Hey, it's 24 hours later. It's time for us to finish the vermouth. We've got this lovely combination of wine and botanicals. We are going to open that, and this is simply a strainer with cheesecloth inside. The idea is we're going to try to get this as clear as possible. We're not going to get it 100% clear. It's going to be homemade after all, so we have to tolerate a certain level of cloudiness that we probably wouldn't tolerate in something store-bought. In any case, let's see what happens. We're going to pour this right through. At the very least, we're going to get the solids out. And in fact, it'll clear up as it sits too, because stuff will settle at the bottom. All I'm going to do with the stuff in here is discard it. It is of no further use to us. I'm going to let that drip in there. And as you can see, it's something, yeah, you know, it's a little cloudy, but who cares, right? All right, now we're going to create the next mixture that we're going to combine with this to come up with the finished product. We have a medium saucepan here into which we are going to pour a half a cup of Demerara sugar. The recipe actually calls for turbinado, it's fine. And then we're going to add just a couple of tablespoons of water to that. Our goal here is not to create a syrup. It's going to be something much thicker than that. We're going to be turning this into a kind of a paste. We want to get this dissolved as much as possible. Well, this isn't terribly interesting for you, so we'll just be back when this is ready to go to our next step. So here is our sugar and water mixture. We're getting something rather thick, and you've got to keep an eye on it because while you want the sugar to dissolve, you don't want it to burn, because you burn it, A, you're going to have a mess on your hands, B, it's definitely going to affect the taste. And get it just to the point where it started to bubble. It is right about there. So what I'm going to do now is turn off the heat, and then we're going to add a couple of additional ingredients. First, we've got half a cup of cognac. And we follow that with 4 teaspoons of the ruby port. 4 teaspoons of that. And then we will stir that all together. Now, when we add this to the other mixture, this is obviously going to sweeten it. It's also going to fortify it. And finally, it's going to give it that reddish color that we expect in sweet vermouth. Now, I've got that nice and combined. Now it's just time to finish things up. Okay, here's the aromatized wine. Here is the sugar and a mixture of sugar and port and cognac. Oh, we don't want to punch sugar sitting at the bottom. All right, could have dissolved a little better, I suppose. And then we have one last step. We're going to add another cup, maybe just a little more than that, of the Pinot Grigio, which is what we started with, of course, to the mix. This is looking very good. Let's seal it up. We're going to give it a good shake Make sure everything is combined well. And now we bottle it. Hey, it smells like vermouth. It looks like vermouth. I think it may be vermouth. And we've got a good amount here. It's enough to last me quite some time. And when I'm done with it, I'll just make more. So, I hope you have found this entertaining and educational. I don't know if you're ever going to order all these botanicals and such and actually make this, but if so, I wish you luck. I actually kind of enjoyed this project. In any case, until next time, cheers!